Good morning, everybody. I'm Joe Braymeyer, and welcome to the Less Than Yesterday show, powered by your friends over here at Treadmill Heroes, located right in Wilton, Iowa, home of new and used home and commercial fitness equipment and saunas. And my special guest today is the retired good Dr. Keith Stanley, retired dentist right here in the great old 52778, Wilton, Iowa. Good morning, Doc Stanley.
Good morning, Joe.
I'm excited to have you in. I've had a lot of people around town saying you got to have Doc in.
Oh, I don't know about all that, but
Well, I think one person at one point mentioned something.
it was probably Mannix or somebody like that.
Very well could be. So thank you for coming in on this early Tuesday morning post-Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I want to kick this off. Where the heck did you even come from? Because you did not spend your childhood in Wilton, correct?
No. I was born in Grinnell, Iowa,
Okay.
and lived on my folks' dad had rented a farm, and my grandpa was a farmer, and he lived about 3 or 4 miles away, and we rented a house and from the landlord, of course.
Okay.
And so I grew up in Grinnell till I was in about 6th grade, so that was about 12 and a half, 13 years old. Then we bought a farm north of Marshalltown.
We being your parents.
The parents.
Okay.
Yes, my parents bought it. And we moved up there, and I went to a small school called Beeman Conrad, Liscum Union Witten now, but it was Beeman Conrad, Liscum then. And that was about, Conrad was 7 miles north of us where the farm was. So I had to ride school bus and stuff. So I moved when I was in 6th grade. And that would have been this March of 64, we moved up there. So I went through junior high and then high school, graduated from Beeman Conrad, and then went to Marshalltown Community College for 2 years, which Marshalltown was 7 miles south of us, so.
It just made sense.
Yeah. And I had some, I was a pretty good athlete, and I had some offers to be at Coe or Cornell to play football or run track, things like that. But I was the oldest, and so Dad said, you can live here. And
You were the heir apparent.
I'll pay your, I'll pay your tuition and stuff. You can live at the house and get your first 2 years of school done.
So what was the trade-off there? You had to work the farm?
Well, had to help, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, always had to work on the farm, sure, yeah.
Favorite sport?
Oh, probably football was my favorite, but I was probably better at baseball. And so that turned into a lot of softball when I got here.
Right, and I want to get into that
Yeah.
because that's when you talk men's league softball, inevitably Doc Stanley is in that conversation.
Well, that's nice. But
So you do the college thing, and then at what point do you say, okay, I need to make a career choice. Either I'm going to be a farmer or I'm going to do something else?
I had in junior high, when I got up there to Beeman Conrad, we had to write a thing, like an essay. What do you think you'll like to do in your, when you grow up, or, and I put down physician. I did a paper on physician or dentist because I kind of like that. The farming part, I like to drive the tractors and stuff like that. I didn't like get up and scooping the hog crap and doing that stuff every morning. And so I decided maybe I'd do something different than farming.
Were you a smart kid?
Not too bad, yeah.
Like, did academics come?
They were easy, kind of easy for me. Actually, I can remember a story that my mom told me that when I was in 2nd grade, this is way back when I was still in Grinnell, the teacher had told her that, you're going to have maybe have him checked because he's kind of, I don't know if he's got it all, And so the 3rd grade teacher had the conference the first time with my mother, and she said, well, is he doing okay? The 2nd grade teacher thought maybe he's going to have some problems. And she goes, he's just a boy, and he's smart, and he does his stuff so fast that when he's done, he's got to do something. So he's talking or he's disrupting the class. She says, I just give him extra work.
It was a case where your brain was developing quicker than the rest of you?
Well, probably. I don't know. It's just probably a normal kid that just, I would probably been ADD or something like that if now with all the
oh yeah,
doctors coming out and telling you all the different things that you've got, but no, so things came easy for me for that. And I just had to, direct my attention to it because I was always kind of, I'd get it done and I want to do something different. I didn't want to sit.
Tell me about your parents.
Dad passed away in 2014. He was raised on farm, and he farmed all the way through.
Same farm?
Actually, he started with renting, and helping Grandpa. Grandpa was, like I said, 3 to 4 miles away when we were at Canal. And Grandpa had a farm that he had bought in the Depression from his brothers. He had saved enough money, so he got the farm and paid them off, and then he worked that farm. And so the boys, Dad had another brother, and they worked with Grandpa, of course, and then went to high school there at Grinnell, and then didn't go to college afterwards. Just when he was looking for a job, he started to cut meat in a place like, it wasn't Fairway, but it was kind of like Fairway.
Sure.
And so he worked in the meat counter, and they transferred him to Boone, Iowa, which is about 60 miles north and west by Ames, just a little farther west than Ames. And he met a cashier or checkout girl, Shirley Preston, and they hit it off, and they ended up getting married. And I came along in about a little more than a year after they got married. So.
And is your mom still with us, or has she passed away too?
Mom's still here. She's 93 years old, lives in a little town north of Marshalltown, Albion.
Really?
Yeah. She lives right behind the Casey's that's on the main drag through the town, and she lives there by herself. And
just Miss Independent.
She's a lot like your grandma. You wouldn't want to mess with her.
Right. And you are correct.
Yeah.
Stay on the good side of Grandma.
That's right. Always do that.
So you mentioned siblings.
I have 2 other brothers.
Okay.
I'm the oldest, and then Gary came along a couple of years later, and he farms a little bit east of Grundy Center, which Grundy Center is the town that we just played in football, of course.
Yes.
But his kids go to actually Gladbrook Rhinebeck, which is another little farther east yet, and then the one right farther than Gladbrook Rhinebeck, right north and a little bit farther east is Dyke, New Hartford. So you looked at all those 3 different high schools that were they were all in the championship playoffs.
That's wild.
So, but Gary farms. He's still there. He raises hogs and does cropping. He does raises row crops, beans and corn, and he has 3 hog buildings on his place. So he's always getting hogs moving somewhere or other.
That's a big operation then.
He does it. He does it where the corporation, he owns the buildings, but the corporations bring the hogs in. He raises them from like feeders on up until they're ready to go to market. So then when they empty the buildings and they sell them, the corporation does, then he has to go in and clean all that up and get it all back into, ready to go and sanitize for the next group that comes in. So he's pretty darn busy.
Do you suppose that's a better deal than doing the whole thing yourself? Or does that even exist in the hog industry now where you do it from bookend to bookend?
There's probably, that's probably the more norm is what we're talking about now, is because you can't, we did it on our farm. When we did it, we bred the hogs. The hogs we had a farrowing house where they had the hogs. Then we had a nursery that you moved them in and out, and then you went to finally the finishing building and we did it all ourselves. But we fed all our corn. We actually sometimes had to buy it from off the farm. We had to buy it from the elevator to grind it to make the feed. So. That's the morning thing. You get up, you'd go feed the hogs. You go, you'd get the silage in the winter, especially. You pitch the silage out of the silo into the silage wagon and take it out and feed the cows. Then you'd go in and shower and get in your car and go to school.
Yeah, then start your day.
So,
what about your other brother? What's he up to?
And then the youngest brother is about 6 years younger than I am. He's a retired. He was the head custodian of the high school in Marshalltown High School, and so he was kind of their big maintenance man and did all the stuff for him there. And he retired about a couple years ago. My middle brother, who's the farmer, is still working.
Good for him. Well, that's a lifelong job, right? I mean, just because you're getting a little bit older doesn't mean the farm stops.
So Eldon got married. Eldon's the youngest, and he's the one that lives in Gilman, Iowa. And he was mayor of Gilman for a long time. And then he finally got smart and give it up, I guess. And so I had to take it over for Wilton. But no.
That's interesting, and I want to get to that too. But 2 of the 3 Stanley brothers were or are a mayor of a small town.
They were, yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, but that's
Gary,
kind of a neat tidbit.
Gary the farmer, I mean, Gary's 6 foot, 250, 260. Eldon's 6'3".
Wow.
About 270. And I'm 5'8" and about 165, 70. Probably 180 if you look at the scales today. But
that's interesting.
So I was the smallest, and they all got a little bigger. I think they ate more. I think I got pushed out. Like, if you watch the hogs, the runt gets pushed around, to the side, and the bigger ones get to eat more.
So we're in the holiday season. What was Christmas like at the Stanley house when you guys were kids? Were you all in a tighter age cluster to where you guys were all kids kind of at the same time?
Yeah, well, me and Gary were 2 grades apart.
Okay.
I was a senior. He was a sophomore in high school.
Okay.
I mean, I was a senior. He was. He went on and played football at Cornell at Mount Vernon, and was a starter for like 3 years and the line for him. And
wonderful.
Yeah, he did really well. And Eldon was about 6 years younger, so we didn't get. I mean, we probably picked on him more because he wasn't our same group. He had to be nice to the little brother. While me and Gary would push each other around, fight, and do stuff. But
do you remember any Christmases in particular when you were a kid?
I can just we used to get real trees, and then we got one of those nice shiny aluminum, sparkly trees, and you had the light on it that rotated and had different colors.
Sure.
And it wasn't as Christmassy then. It was, but you didn't have the smell of the Christmas tree or anything like that. And so you'd go back to get a regular tree, and then finally, I think Mom talked Dad into buying a fake green tree, but yeah, it was always fun. I mean, we didn't get a lot because we didn't have a lot, but you'd get up early in the morning and run down the stairs if you were upstairs, and we had a 2-story house, like an old farmhouse, 4 by square, all the bedrooms are upstairs, and everybody would run down. Then they'd try to get Mom and Dad up, so they'd come down.
Sure.
So you could open your presents. And
Dad was probably out doing chores already.
In some cases he did. In some cases he'd wait till afterwards, and then he'd say, "All right, get your stuff on. You're going out and help me."
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed your 1 hour of Christmas. It's time to get to work.
And Mom just stayed home and did all the housework and all the laundry and cooking and stuff and baking, and she was always doing something like that, keeping the house good. And
so you grow up, you go to college, you do the thing. How do you end up with dentistry? Do you just make that decision at some point?
Probably in high school, I decided I'd really go to dentistry because I was thinking as being a doctor or a physician that I'd be getting up more in the middle of the night. I was wrong because the physicians didn't do that anymore. When as you got, if you can remember in your old town doctor, you'll hear some of the older guys here, you'll talk about Doc Wetstein.
Sure.
Who, if you had a problem, you'd call him, he'd get in his car and he'd drive out, get his bag and drive out to your house. They were always doing stuff for the community and the area. Well, as you got into more group practices, that didn't happen. Go to the emergency room. I don't know if they won't come. You go to the emergency room.
Right.
The emergency room looks at you. Or urgent care, you go to the emergency room, then they took you in, and then you finally get looked at. Well, back in that day, I thought, geez, I didn't want to get up all the time and going out. But, so I decided to be a dentist, or like to be a dentist. And so I looked at the University of Iowa and looked at all the requirements, and I could get all my requirements done at MCC also, and it was a lot cheaper, and the classes were a lot smaller. So in medical field, you look at, when you're starting out, everybody's together, pharmacists, doctors, dentists, they're all going through all the undergrad, Chem 1, Chem 2, Organic 1, Organic Chemistry 2. And those classes at the University of Iowa were 1,500, 1,800 kids in the class.
That's interesting you say that, though, because for some reason in my head, I just pictured if you decide I want to be a dentist, then the whole trip down dentist lane is just with other like dentists. And and it makes sense, right? You're getting into the medical field. You've got a lot of prerequisites that you've got to go through that are just, you got to check the box. Anyway, interesting.
So at the University of Iowa, those classes are the make or breaks. Your grades that you get in those classes are going to determine whether or not you're really going to go on and go to that, or you're going to start looking for another job or another profession. And so at MCC, for instance, there was maybe 30, 40 kids in the chemistry class, Chem 1, Chem 2. Probably when we got to organic chemistry, which is the next big chopping block in the deal, we might have had 15 or 20.
Wow.
And so you could get all kinds of help from the regular professor, not a TA, not somebody that was, teaching the class because the regular professor, well, I got something else to do, you do it today. It was the same guy. Jack Holliday was his name, or Holloway was his name, and he had been a chemist at one of the big, corporation chemical things. I can't say which one it was, but he had some patents that he developed and stuff. But then he wanted to get into teaching, and so he was our teacher, and he was really quite a guy. And so we ended up getting through there and getting good grades on all of that. And so then that transferred into when I transferred to Iowa my junior year. I ended up being able to take some other classes and some couple extra tests. I took a graduate records test and some other test, and he also took the college aptitude test, DAT test. And I did good on all of those. And so when I did good on those, what happened was, middle of my junior year in Iowa, I got a letter that I was accepted into the dental college. So in 1973, the fall of 1973, I was a freshman in the brand new dental college of University of Iowa, which sits right to the east of Carver Hawkeye.
So I always thought you were just an Iowa fan because of the wrestling program and the athletics, and just we live 30 minutes from Iowa City. So guess I didn't even realize you went to medical school at the University of Iowa.
Well, dental college.
Dental college.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Graduated there in 1977, May of 1977, and came here started the practice and opened up for the first day, July 25th, 1977 in Wilton, Iowa.
Why Wilton?
I wanted to be somewhere close to Iowa City so I could go back to the football games and the basketball games and stuff. Wrestling was something I liked. I played basketball in high school. My brothers wrestled. But I couldn't wrestle in high school or junior high especially, because I had to stay after school. Dad said no. I'm not coming and stopping the stuff that I'm doing on the farm and coming and getting you and bringing you home. So you're riding the bus home. Well, I couldn't do the wrestling, so I started playing basketball because I could do that the 8th period for practice in junior high. But wrestling was after that. So I became a basketball player. And so anyway, I wanted to be within an hour. So I drew like a 60-mile radius around there. I looked at Makokata. I actually went as far and went and visited with people in El Cater and stuff.
Wow.
So what happened was my senior year, they had one of the big organizations that sell product to the dentist, anywhere from gauze to instruments to everything else that you use, was out of Des Moines. It's called Iowa Dental, and they give the seniors a orientation for practice availability dinner it was in the fall, late fall. So we went, and by that time I was married to Rosemary, and she was also graduated from Beeman Conrad. So, I started dating her when I was a senior in high school. So we had been together for there. But anyway, we got married, and she worked as X-ray tech at the dental college. She ended up getting a job after we got married, and so she worked at the dental college. She just retired, I think, last year from working at the dental college. But she'd work all these years there also. So 77 we came here. But anyway, they give the dinner, and the guy gets done after we eat, and he goes, now, if anybody wants to go to Des Moines, go over to this corner of the room, because there's the representative for Des Moines. If you want to go to Davenport, go over here. If you want to go to Waterloo, go over to that guy over there. You want to go to Dubuque, you want to go south, So they give you different areas. So I went over to the Davenport.
Okay, this is fascinating to me because I like the business end of this. You have a company that sells dental supplies, from floss to the big expensive machinery.
Yep.
And everything in between.
Everything in between. Iowa Dental is what it was called.
Iowa
Dental Supply.
They host a big dinner
for seniors
to share with up-and-coming dentists on where the opportunities are that communities that are in need of a dentist.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, but that's a beautiful thing from a business standpoint, because it's like, hey, we're gonna give you a roadmap of where you can go to open up a practice and have a captive audience, right? Have a I don't know, a territory, if you will.
Okay,
yeah. But we're going to be the ones that are selling you all the stuff. So it's in their best interest to help set you up for success, because certainly you're going to be buying all of the things you need to start your practice from them.
Right. So
it's a good business move.
So I go to the guy by Davenport. His name's Roger Riley, and there's probably 15 of us. There's different guys from the class. And so I finally started talking to him, and he goes, what do you want to do? And I said, I like small town. I grew up in a small town. I was a farm kid. I'm looking for, some place that's, 2,000 to 5,000. I want my kids to be able to grow up and have the opportunities to play if they want to play sports, not have to go in, the big towns where you had 500 and 600 kids in the class. He goes, hey, I got one for you. He goes, Wilton's been looking for a dentist. I said, Wilton? He goes, yeah, Wilton. I said, Wilton Junction? He looked at me and goes, well, yeah, that's what they used to call it. I go, no, Wilton Junction. I said, a kid that I grew up with in Grinnell went there. And he goes, what? I said, Jack Allgood. He goes,
really?
He didn't know Jack Allgood from anything, but I said, Jack Allgood went there. I said, they had a really good football team when I was a junior, and he would have been a senior. They had a good team. We were ranked 1 and 2, but we never had playoffs. So we used to follow them in the Des Moines Register and see who. They were undefeated, and we had one tie. And so they finished 1, we finished 2.
So that was your connection to the town.
So I said, I'll go look at Wilton. So he says, I'll be there in 2 weeks. I'll pick you up Iowa City and I'll take you. He says, I've got contacts there. I'm talking with the banker and one of the other guys that works there. So he picks me up and we drive into Wilton, Iowa, 30 miles. I go to Wilton Savings Bank, Rod Burnett, vice president. Shake his hand, talk about like what we're doing. Where'd you grow up? You were a farmer. I was a farmer too, you know. Then he takes me over to the building that I actually own now and went upstairs and met Wayne Carpenter, who actually bought the bank from Harold Nicholas. But Wayne Carpenter says, yeah. He says, I got space below here. I says, I'll make the room any way you want it. Where my office was that you used to come in and everybody else. He says, I'll have it remodeled exactly the way you want it. So, and we went around and looked at houses availability, stuff like that in Wilton, you know.
So the guy who owns the bank owns the building that he's willing to, is at that point, is buying the building on the table or is leasing the space down below on the table at that point?
Just leasing it, you know. I think he's $350.
And certainly Wayne knows that Wilton needs a dentist, so it's in the best interest of the growth of the town and the community to have a dentist brought in.
So and I looked at all the different areas, and so, you know, it reminded me of Conrad, you know, and, you know, or the smaller town that I was looking for. So I went back to Iowa City, went to Merritt Student Housing where we lived, and told Rosemary, I said, hey, really neat little town. I said, something we'd like to look at maybe. So she goes, oh, okay. So that Sunday, we turned around, drove back down, and I did the tour that I had just taken with the guys, but just me and her. I said, well, this house is available here if we wanted to buy it, or this house here, but here's the office that I'd probably have, and, you know, here's the town. She goes, well, looks good to me. So I called the guy up and said, Roger Riley, I says, we're going to go to Wilton. He says, well, I'll get a hold of Rod Burnett. So we got a hold of Burnett, and so we started that, had the plans drawn up, had the building measured, had all the plans built up. They got all the equipment ordered.
Was it a scary time? I mean, this is kind of like modern day settler kind of stuff. We're going to move to a town that we know very little about other than a tour here or there.
Yeah.
We're going to buy a house. We're going to start a business. We're going to start an expensive business to start, right? And we're going to start our lives in this town that we know a little bit about because of high school football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it stressful, or was it just you didn't have time to think about it?
It was exciting. I mean, was it stressful? Sure. But, you know, I don't know an area you weren't going to go to unless you were going back into your dad's practice. You know, if your dad was a dentist or your uncle was a dentist, and you were going back into the town with them. If you're going by yourself, I went by myself. There was no other group there. There was nobody to call up and say, hey, what do you think I ought to do on here? It's look at it, you know, remember what you were taught, do it.
So you and Rosie buy a house, you start the business.
We rented above Artie's for the first month. There was an apartment above there. It's two buildings together.
The dentist office building?
No.
Above Artie's?
Well, it's Artie's Brothers now. It's the cafe.
Okay, and so the apartment above the Wilton Cafe, that's where you guys originally lived.
So we moved there from May till June, and then we rented a house from Nellie Osmus, which is down on the 4th Street, East 4th Street. It's a little square house. Sam Baker owns it now. Nancy Baker lives there. It's right across from Junior Crest. It's a little white house just on the corner. Really little thing, right by the railroad. Railroad's just, you know, south there. And so we moved there a month afterwards. So in like 2 months, we moved twice. And then in November of that year, I bought the house on Waite Street from Ron Alpin. But it was Dean Smith had it on the as the realtor, and we bought that house. And then that's where, well, she's still living there.
Who was your first good buddy? Who was your first good friend that you made once you moved to town and got settled in?
Well, Our first night that we were in that house on Waite Street, or on 4th Street, Nellie Osmond's, that we were renting. Rosemary had got home from work. I'd got back from helping get the office started because they were rebuilding it with all new walls, all plywood. I'd helped the Grunder boys a little bit doing it, and Herm and Kurt Smith, the Smith boys, were doing the finish work. But anyway, the Grunders were doing all the other stuff. Plus, I had Pete Broders was doing the electrical and or doing the plumbing, and then Norm Peaks was doing the electrical. And so I was always in that office, getting it ready, because we were here at the end of May, and I didn't open till in the middle of May, like I said, July 25th of 77. So we had all that time getting ready and getting the stuff. But anyway, we're sitting at the kitchen table, looking out. If you look out that table where the kitchen was, you'd look over where Junior Chris lives, across the street. Well, I'm sitting there, and I see this guy come walking down the street. And he's coming from the north, and he walks down. I said, oh. I said, one of the neighbor guys out for a walk. So then he walked around, and next thing I know, the front door, which faces to the south, there's a knock on the door. And I get up. Well, he goes, hey, you guys just move in? I said, yeah. He goes, well, I'm Howard Maurer.
Really?
I live up the street here. Betty and me live up there. We got a couple kids still living in the house, but he says, I got a bunch of kids, but he says, just wanted to welcome the neighborhood. I said, well, thank you. He goes, you got a beer? I said, well, yeah. So
I got two.
I went and opened a beer and give it to him. He walked in and sat down at the table with us. We were eating supper, and he drank a beer. Was talking about, well, I got the gas station here. I help with the buses. He says, I do the cemetery. He says,
I mean, for the people watching that don't know, maybe my age or a little bit younger, and I had the benefit of growing up in a gas station in this town, you rattled off a list of people who effectively helped build the town and modernize it and make it what it is today. And certainly Howard was one of those people.
Well, Howard did that. So Howard goes, if you're still hungry, he says, Betty don't cook until about, 8:30, 9 o'clock is when we eat supper. So if you're still hungry, come on up. And I didn't that day, but, every night after that, he'd come walk down the street. I'd have the beer sitting on the front of the door. You'd hear him open it up. Thanks, stud.
Oh.
He'd come in and sit down with me and Rosemary.
What a neat memory.
So from there, I got to meet Tom.
Yep.
And, of course, all the other Mauers, because, Mark was still at home. And Lori was a senior in high school. And then the baby was Christy. And then so I got to meet all them. So Howard's kind of, Mauer's kind of, well, from there I meet Gomer Hansen or Gary Hansen, who was married to Becky Hansen, Becky Maurer, that was, and so got to meet Jane. I got to meet Terry, I got to meet Sandy.
That is an incredible story, only because obviously when you see Doc around town, you usually see some, you're hanging out with some of the Maurers, and you just assume, well, they're just from Wilton, they're pals. You guys you've been part of the family since you moved to town.
Well, kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And so then from there you meet the Maroffs, and you got Benny Maroff, and you got Randy Maroff, and Dale Maroff, and then you got, from there, you start meeting different people. I got to meet all the, I call them cool people in town because
influential people around town. You bet.
Your grandpa, Charlie, your dad's kind of mentor, Charlie Snickloth, came in. He was I was on the board in the Methodist Church. He was one of there. Bob Barrett was on that board. So at the Methodist Church when I was getting started. So I got to meet a lot of, Stub Linker, Harold Bill Grunder.
We could write a Wilton history book on the names that you're listing off
Max
right
Losser, now. You can just go down the names of the guys. Harold Nicholas.
Wow.
Rod Burnett.
So you start getting tied in with everyone in the community. You're making friends very easily and rapidly. Talk to me about the metaphorical ribbon cutting at the dentist office. Did business take off right away, or did it take a while?
Well, I started off, I only had one operatory completely fully equipped.
One chair,
So
ready to roll.
I had the second chair there, but I didn't have probably all the equipment. I mean, I had the arm and stuff on it, but I didn't have it fully stocked. Dean Smith, whose wife Gloria was my first receptionist and assistant. She would come back, and our first patient was Rod Burnett, because he was the one we got the loan from, and he says, I want to be your first patient. So he was number one.
What'd you do?
Just
standard oil change?
Yeah.
Yep.
Cleaning and x-rays and exam. And, that first day we might have had 6 patients, maybe, And Gloria would, if the phone rang, it wasn't, it was landline. Everything was landline. So she'd get up, have the appointment book, no computers, no internet, book, write the name and the time slot, and did it in pencil in case they canceled. You could, erase it. And it started from there.
Wow. So business is booming. When does the family start to grow?
So that was in 77. So, Corey came in February of 78. So Rosemary found out she was pregnant about the time we were getting ready to move here. And, so we had Corey.
Starting a business, moving to a new town, and pregnant with first kid on the way.
And in November, I'd bought the house of 77. I'd bought the house on Waite Street. So now we had a permanent...
a full throttle. Here we go.
And that'd been our third move in 6 months, but because we had to rent in those 2 other spots. So, yeah, we're rolling. Yeah, we're rolling. And so that summer, while in 77, before everybody got started, we were riding our bikes around. Well, we went by the park. Well, here's a ball game going on. Well, Gomer and Tom were playing. And, hey, you play? I said, yeah. Well, why don't you come play with us? So I think we were playing for the Wooden Nickel at that time. The bar of the Wooden Nickel. Jim Arrowwood had it.
And at the time, that was a big part of the small town culture, right?
Oh, yeah.
Was these beer drinking softball leagues, or was it more of a competitive type thing at that?
It was more competitive then.
Okay.
And so I started playing with them. Dean Dinkman was on the team. Raleigh Ford, Roger Bender, Randy Maroff, Itchy Johansson, Raleigh Ford.
Would you play other teams in town, or did you play other towns?
At that time, we were playing mainly the town league, but every once in a while, we'd go to Walcott and play, maybe a weekend tournament, or maybe West Liberty. Sometimes Muscatine. Wapalo's about as far south as we'd go usually, but it wasn't every weekend. It wasn't like when I got my teams going, we were playing almost all the time.
Take me back to that point in time when you're playing small town competitive softball. Was that a big part of the culture in lots of small towns? Was that like
I think so. Slow pitch took over from fast pitch because the pitchers started nobody would develop younger pitchers. So you had an older pitcher. Well, if they got old enough they didn't want to pitch anymore, that team Durant always had more fast pitch in it, as far as we had slow pitch. And there was a Sunday slow pitch league that was called the Tri-County League that we played fast pitch in. And that was Donahue, Bluegrass, Davenport, Walcott, Durant, us. Moscow Farmers played fast pitch with it. Dale Krameyer and all them guys. Hunzelman. You can go down a bunch of old guys, great guys. But they played fast pitch. Burkhoffers, the Maroffs.
So run me through the timeline. at what point do you end up purchasing the building? Does that come a lot later?
I purchased the building in 81.
Okay, so that comes fairly quickly.
Yep. I did. They set it up on a contract, so it was almost like rent to own, but, do the contract, 10-year contract, bought it for, I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't exorbitant,
What comes first, the Sal Belly's softball team or Doc's gym? Or do they happen at the same time?
It kind of happens about the same time. We had always wanted to play. We always wanted to play Sal Belly, or play it when Gomer got killed in 81 or 2 in a Jeep accident. And so the Sal Belly that we drew on the deal was a caricature of him with a hog head on it, because he sat with his legs crossed like that. But anyway, so we called it.
So the iconic Sal Belly's logo meant something. It wasn't just a random.
It kind of meant something to us.
Well, sure it did.
But yeah. So we started that up, and everybody was supposed to be over 200 and some pounds except for me. And so we had a lot of guys, and there's a few of them that are not here anymore. But and they weren't probably. Bill Cole played catcher for us. We called him Bluto.
Yeah.
And he's gone now, but he loved it. Stan Ryder's still around. He played with us. Stan Salvo played with us. Ronnie Sankson's still in town, married to Barb Townsend. He played with us. We had a pitcher from Muscatine called Ron Evans. We called him like Evans Farms,
You mentioned Bluto. Can I tell you a quick Bluto story that I remember as a kid? There was actually 2 of them, but I remember Bluto used to come into the station all the time when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And Bluto was kind of a prankster. He was a funny guy. I just remember him being a funny guy. And I remember my dad and him each individually sent off for a drawing in Las Vegas to win a car. And Bluto knew somebody out in Las Vegas, and so he had an official "you won" certificate made up, mailed it out to Las Vegas, and then had that person mail it from a Las Vegas postmark thing back to Dad to tell him that he won the car. And Dad was really excited, and then come to find out it was Bluto just messing with him. And then the other thing was my mom and dad have a large picture window in their front living room, and then you can see the TV from the street. And Bluto got a universal remote and would come over to my parents' house and stand in the front yard and change the channel on my dad and mess with him.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And so you mentioned Bluto, and I have those 2 story memories of him, and I can picture him in my head. So
we had Tom Maurer, of course, and Mannix, Bob Glennie. They were on the team too, and they all played. It wasn't that you just had the big guys sitting on the bench, and so it was a lot of fun. We had a big rivalry against the younger kids, Mark Maurer and Todd Linker and Craig Bach and them guys, John Snyder. They were on the group. It was called Maurer's Mobile at one time, because Maurer Mobile had the gas station there on the corner that's no longer there on 5th Street and Maurer. Anyway, we called them the rookies because they were younger. And it was always come down to usually the Sal Bellies were playing the rookies for the championship of the city, Wilton. And one time we brought in, I'd got Dad's car. Dad was always tinkering with stuff. He put 2 cars together. He had an Eldorado and a Toronado. And he put them together because they were, oh, no, wait a minute. It was a Toronado and a 98, because they were both, he wanted to both Oldsmobiles. And he cut them in half, and he put them together, welded it all good, and braced it up.
Literally put half and half, put them together.
Half and half, the front car. And one maroon was the Toronado, and the cream colored was the 98. Left the steering wheels, both of them. The Toronado drove it because it was front wheel drive, and you could get in both sides, and you could turn so you could go down the road sideways. Well, I brought it down for Founders Day parade. Neil Rabideau wanted it. He was going to have his advertisement on it in the parade. Well, we brought it down a couple of weeks before. Well, lo and behold, we had the Armageddon softball game between the rookies and the Sowbellies. Well, they came in a hog trailer and all got out of the hog trailer.
That's great.
We come in with the two-ended car, all of us in the two-ended car, and we were blaring Ghostbusters because it was, who you going to call?
Right.
Sowbellies.
Sowbellies.
And we blasted that as we came up, and that was a Friday night, and the place was packed with people watching it.
Do you see a resurgence of softball in general, or is it just kind of hanging on, you feel?
I think it's starting a little bit, There was probably 10, 15 years ago, it was just a few. I mean, we used to have 30. When we went to Muscatine and played, there was 30 teams in the league.
Wow.
Wilton had 10 teams at least, and we turned some away.
Wilton had 10 softball teams?
Coming from different places around, yeah.
So it was definitely part of the culture.
It was
then.
It was Friday night. Well, it wasn't just Friday night because we played during the week, but yeah.
So talk to me about Doc's Gym.
Doc's Gym was a deal that I'd always wanted to have do something and lift, do something. And I had a friend that I'd met through softball that had a gym, was working in a gym and had bought a gym over in East Moline. It was called Universe Gym. It was one of the Repliker boys had it.
Dale Replinger.
Mr. Universe.
Yes.
Cousin of the Grunders, Greg Grunder and Brian and all them. That was part of it. Well,
he's probably the most well-known bodybuilder of this area at that time.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And so I decided, that what happened is Chuck Peterson is the friend of mine that I played softball with, decided to sell some of the deal and get newer equipment. So I said, well, I've got a place up above the dental office that I could put some of that equipment. So I had a leg press and I had lateral and a pec machine and a low row, 2 or 3 benches, stack of dumbbells in a rack, bought those, brought them up there and put them upstairs and started Doc's Gym and sold memberships for, I don't know, $10 or $15 or $20 a month and give you a key and you could go up and work out anytime you wanted to. It was kind of bad sometimes when I had guys working up there and we were working in the dental office.
I imagine you could hear the weights hitting the floor.
Because sometimes the guys didn't return the weights nicely to the floor, and so the lights would kind of shake and people.
Oh, that's great.
So I started Doc's Gym. I had that probably 3 or 4 or 5 years. There was a lot of people worked out up there. And then I decided, well, that's enough. And Steve Brisker came to this building and bought that equipment, brought that down, and then added a bunch. Steve Brisker started this gym at this building we're at right now.
Yep.
And then I think you might have taken over after that.
I was a couple owners later.
So there was Freeman would have got in there then probably.
Well, it was, just to set the timeline from the way I understand it, Brisker's had it here, and then it turned into the Fitness Zone.
No. Okay.
And there was a lady named Rhea that owned it, or ran it, at least. And then from there, it became, I believe at that point, it became the Pit.
Okay.
And then it was under new ownership for a while. Then it became the Pit again. Then it became Freeman Total Fitness.
Okay.
So this building has been a gym for a long time, but I just find it fascinating that you not only started the very first dental office in town, but you started the very first gym.
Well, I don't know if it was the first gym.
Was there another gym? Was there another place you could work out in town?
I think it was just guys that had their own stuff.
I'd call that the first gym in town.
But anyway, so then we started a softball team with that, of course. And that's when I had Pete Anderson and all the Brisker boys played for me, and Mark Maurer, Tom Maurer, you know.
Is there any old swag left from those?
Yeah.
Is there like
there's a few old shirts that I've got up.
A Sal Belly's shirt or a Doc's Gym shirt? I mean, it would be neat to at least get a picture of that, because I think that's, I mean, I don't know. I'd like to just see you post a couple pictures of some of that old apparel.
I talked to, this about 2 or 3 months ago, Jeff Nichols, the Navy SEAL.
Yeah, an absolute all-American badass from Wilton.
Yes, he come in and sat and talked to me for about an hour and a half one day, just saying how he really enjoyed growing up in a small town and being so good friends with my kids and all the guys, and how, you know, he was taken care of when his dad or mom weren't around. There was always somebody watching for him or taking care of him if he was, you know. And he thanked me and Rosemary and some other people. But he goes, "Do you still have any of those old Doc's Boys gyms? You know, like they had the bad boys."
Yes.
You know, and I says, "I'll look and I found one and give it to him."
Oh, that's great.
And so yeah, I got a few old ones that are either too small or way too big.
Oh, you got to post some pictures of those. You got to. So when does Justin come along, your second son?
Justin comes along in 79 November. His birthday was just last week. He comes around, and then so that was 2 within about a year and a half, 2 years. And so we thought we were pretty well done with it. And then Cody came along and was born in 88. So about 10 years younger.
A little bit of a gap there.
A little bit of gap. But.
And somewhere along the lines, Pete comes in.
Pete came in. This is a great story if you've got time.
I do. I want to take a quick time out just to tell everybody back that's watching right now. We turn the furnace off in here because it's loud, but we've got the headphones and the mics. Turn that thing on because, like, I like it a little chilly, but it's getting a little nipply in here. So, okay, we're gonna fire up the furnace in here. You have 3 sons, but then Pete Robles comes along. So tell me the story about Pete.
Pete Robles, the Robles family lived right across from your dad's gas station, Kitty Corner, in that house when we got here. And there was 2 sisters and 2 brothers. And Pete was right in between Corey and Justin. So they played kids baseball. They played, I don't know if we had flag football back then or not. I don't think we'd started that yet. But anyway.
Your boys were very athletic.
Yeah.
Very accomplished athletes. So anyway, go ahead.
So we started wrestling. We started wrestling with the Kramer. We used to have a Friday night tournament. Dale Kramer started it. And so 2nd grade, I think Corey started wrestling. So when Corey started wrestling, Justin wanted to go. So he was like, you know, just in kindergarten. And so what happened was Randy Maroff was having a club out in his garage out on the farm north of Moscow there. And so there was about 6 to 8 kids that went out there and worked out. Mike Koss, Corey Brenner, Kevin Brisker.
And at the time, this was just a thrown together thing out in a...
Thrown to thing.
Okay.
And so what we did is that then we just started to get a little bigger. More kids wanted to play or try it. So the next thing that happened is that Randy decided that, talked to the high school, and the high school said, yeah, you guys can come up here and practice after we're done.
Really?
So it started off, and so he called it Moscow Wrestling. Well, in Moscow Wrestling, what happened is Pete gets into that, and he's wrestling. So he's playing baseball in the summer, and he's always around our kids. And so then his mom and dad get divorced. And that was probably about 4th grade.
Okay.
5th grade. They leave the town. Mom goes to Denver. Dad goes to Muscatine. The girls go to Muscatine, and the boys go with their mom, I think, to Denver. Anyway, so Pete's out in Denver with his mother. She gets remarried out there. They get divorced, but she gets remarried out there. So it's the summer let's see, it would be, I don't know what year it was. It would have been Justin's 6th grade year, finish his 6th grade year. He's going to go into 7th grade, so Pete's going to go into 8th grade. That spring, I get a phone call.
So Pete's about 13, 14.
13 or 14.
Okay, and he's grown up in Wilton. Now all of a sudden he's out in Denver,
and now,
away from everyone he knows and his friends.
And he's got more gangs and stuff out there he doesn't like. So he moves back to Muscatine and stays with his sisters and his dad. That's 7th grade. That spring, probably April, I get a phone call. Hello, this is Pete Robles. Hey, Pete, how you doing? He says, I'm doing good. He says, I moved back to Muscatine. I said, oh, that's great. He goes, I got a question. I said, what's that? He says, you think I could come live with you?
That's a big question.
I said, well, I don't know. I said, let me ask Rosemary. So I said, I'll get back with you. Dr. Rosemary, she goes, oh, he'd be a lot better here with our kids.
Wow.
So call him back. Yep, you can do that. That and last day of school in Muscatine, somebody drove up a Chevrolet Impala, stopped outside Waite Street, the driveway, opened up the trunk, pulled out a big trunk suitcase, dropped it on the driveway, shut the deal, dropped it. Pete stood there. The guy drives off. We've had him ever since.
Wow. And you get emotional talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
I get emotional kind of hearing the story because who knows what would have happened.
Yeah. I mean his brother's state champion, but his brother's in Denver somewhere. We don't hardly see him anymore. So, I mean, he's here. He's got 3 kids, lives in Wilton.
Big part of the community.
Big part of the community. Mom and dad, his mom and dad have both passed. So, yeah.
Did you guys end up officially adopting him?
No.
You just took care of him?
I thought we should keep his name.
Yeah.
Robles.
It's nice.
And so he went to University of Iowa, graduated. Been a great young man.
Well, and you know what? You were fortunate enough to be in a position where you could financially support that. You could do that.
Yeah. And we became foster parents. I mean, we went to the classes and stuff, and so the state would pay so much a month to help defray some of the costs. Really didn't bother us that much because we had a house full of boys.
Yeah.
And so Cody was the little guy, and so
Well, not only boys, but you had a house full of athletic, like raring to go boys. I mean, the Stanley boys were not known as being docile kids.
Probably. Yeah, that's probably right. They took after their mother.
That's great. So then, during all of this, or after it, you become a DJ as well. When does Doc's DJ thing kick in?
Well, I had a stereo like everybody did, the old stacked style. You had the stack, and then you'd have the 2 big speakers. And I had Kevin Brisker moved away and wanted to know if I would play for his dad called me, Kevin Sr. called me and said, can you come up to Lisbon and play for his graduation? And that was probably in 93, 94.
Yeah.
I said okay.
For his graduation party.
In Lisbon. So I took speakers, stuff, put it all there. Everything was off of tapes. Cassette tapes.
Right.
Back then.
Yeah, there was CDs were barely starting at that point in time, but you certainly would have had a bigger tape collection than you did a CD collection.
And so, I'd make up a tape, and I'd make up 3 or 4. I probably had 45 tapes or 50 tapes. You'd click them, and you'd try to get them to the right, starting point and hit the button. And so I did that. And then I was asked by Tom Wilson, who's now is the head coach at Dowling, was a football coach here.
I remember Tom Wilson. I remember Wilson. Coach Wilson, yes.
Coach Wilson. He got married and wanted to know if I'd DJ his wedding, and that was in Newton, Iowa. And from there, it just started. So then I said, well, shit, I'm going to have to buy some regular speakers. I can't take my house stuff all the time.
Yeah.
But I played his wedding in Newton back, it was probably 94, 95, whenever they got married. And so it started from there. And so then it graduated from tapes to CDs, which were a lot nicer because you could just go.
You could go to the next track.
You could go to the next track. You could cue it up and be ready to go instead of finding the tape and trying to get in the right spot. But, yeah. And so now it's not, you don't even have CDs anymore. Everything's done off of the computer that you download your music to. And it's all, you make all your stuff up there. So you bring in a laptop and you have maybe a head to run the speakers. Most of those now are self-powered. You plug them in. You can either Wi-Fi it or you can run it by cord.
And now you can just create all your mix almost. And to even a step further, you can now start incorporating AI to just say, hey, mix this song and make them go together. And it's kind of incredible. That's
so far beyond me. It's unbelievable. But so I ended up, doing that for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And I did a lot of weddings and a lot of graduations and a lot of anniversaries and stuff for people.
I mean, you were known as the DJ for a long time in this community and around. I mean, you probably did hundreds of gigs, right?
Probably, yeah. And that was when I had 6 cases of CDs and the big box that had the amp and the mixer in it, and then the 2 big speakers, and then the stands, and then the light stand, and it filled the back of the van up.
What was one of your favorite gigs?
Oh,
do any of them stand out?
Oh, I had so many good ones. I mean, I was DJing for. This is just a story that comes up to mind. I'm DJing on a wedding for Cindy and Dan Timpson. Signed up for it. Well, it's a football game at Iowa. So I said, I'll have everything set up. John Snyder can run it until I get back from the football game. And it was an early football game. So, I got in the parking lot. The dance had already started. And it might have been a half hour. And I remember Todd Cracklow sitting outside the community center, and I pull up, and he looks at me and he goes, "Doc, you got to get in there." He goes, "Snyder's killing it. He's terrible." I mean, he's
killing it in a bad way.
In a bad way. And so it was just, I laugh about it. I give Snyder crap all the time when I see him about it, but it was just kind of those deals. But we've always had great parties. I mean, the old International Lounge out here, there was graduation parties that I'd have the whole dance floor full,
I mean, I can remember growing up going out to parties and wedding receptions and, like I said, graduations, and Doc was always up on the stage doing the DJing.
Yeah. I just enjoyed it. And it was always fun to watch people have fun, and, never had any big problems that way, but yeah.
So then along comes Doc the Mayor. How do we now get from there to you running the town?
I don't run the town. I'm just head of the town. I don't run it. I've got plenty of good people underneath me that do the running for me. That's the smart thing to do. Have good people underneath you so you don't have to do all the running yourself. And I do.
You can see my staff here. I'm the dumbest person on the payroll, that's by design too.
I'm not going to say anything on that about the dumbest, but you've got some great help in this.
So how does it happen? Do you get approached? Do people start mentioning things to you? Do you make a conscious decision to say, you know what, I think I would like to do this?
Well, through softball, I got on the city park, the park board. So I was on park board for, 15 years, and you get elected to that. It was a 6-year term. And so you get, you had to run for that back in the day. Now I appoint that. We've decided that it kind of, the parks went down far enough, or the leagues and stuff, we didn't need to have that at a time. So anyway, after that is Coach Wilson wants to go to Ball State and get his athletic administration master's. The school board says you can have 1 year leave of absence. He goes, it takes 2. Well, we can't hold your job for 2 years. I went to the school board and lobbied all the school board members, and 2 years is fine. All you got to do is tell the people, if there's a job, you'll get it. But, if he comes back, he's a great coach, and we know what he's got. Well, they wouldn't do it. So I said, well, I'm going to run for school board. So I ran for school board, got on it, started talking with Wilson, got him back in the deal, got him an interview after 2 years to come back to Wilton. And right in the middle of it, it fell through with some other stuff that I'm not going to go into. It wasn't any of his fault. It was some other stuff. But anyway, so he goes to Dyke, New Hartford. Well, I'm still on the school board, and I'm president of the school board in 98, get to sign all the diplomas and all that stuff. And then I didn't get reelected. I got beat by Dave Anderson in reelection. So I said a couple of years, and then Kenny Lincoln called me and said, do you want to be on the municipal light board? I've got an opening. Oh, yeah. You meet once a month. You get paid $50.
Sure.
A month. Oh, boy, that's great. I said, sure. So I got on that. And from there, then I ran for city council. Got on city council after, I think I got beat the first time. 2001, I got on city council. Been on city council ever since. And then Bob Barrett was a good friend and mentor and stuff in city council stuff. We were on a lot of different boards. He was the mayor, decided he didn't want to be mayor anymore.
Okay.
He says, I'm not going to run again. He says, Doc, you ought to run. And I said, oh, man. I said, I don't have a vote. I said, I like being able to vote. He goes, you don't want somebody to come in that is not used or knows the town. Even though they live here, somebody brand new can change the whole thing the way things are going. We've got it going pretty good. I think you ought to run. So I said, okay. So I ran, and so nobody went against me. This is the second term. I'll have to run again next year if I want to do the third term.
Are you going to run again?
Probably. I don't know. The wife would say no. She'd like to be able to have more freedom. You get tied down a little bit because you got meetings.
Sure.
And you can miss some of the meetings, but I'm just saying there's a lot of things. I sign all the city checks and stuff, so I go in about like once a day and check out, see if there's anything I need to sign, talk with the city administrator, Jeff Horn now, talk to them. Is there any problems? No, everything's going good. See Bobby Van Dusen, our public works guy. Got anything going on? Nope, everything's going good, Doc. I might need something like this. And I said, well, let us know, and I'll see what we can do.
I'm certainly biased, but do you feel like Wilton is run like a very well-oiled machine with very good people? Certainly the answer is yes, but you can look at other small towns that are like a Wilton, Iowa, and you can just say that's not run as well as it could be. I just feel like this town is run very well.
And like I said before, some of that is who you get in your operating or your chief positions in different places. I mean, back in early 2000s, we had a lot of rigmarole going with the police department and stuff. They were fighting with the city council. If you can remember Dick Summey.
Yeah.
Dick Summey, who had a good friend of ours and played on the Sawbellies.
That was a wild time.
And he got arrested for marijuana stuff. He was the mayor at the time. I was on city council. There was always this tension between the police department. They wanted to do this, and we'd say, well, let's, and so things have mellowed out now. We've had two different chiefs after that We had Leathers. Tim Leathers was a chief there, and now we've got Dave Clark, and these guys seem to have got everything, in good shape. I mean, the fire department, we have had no big problems. I mean, there's been a little ruffle here and there, but now we've got Jamie Hall as the chief. And so you get those. Bob Van Duzen's the main guy. We got Robert Krameyer as the water and wastewater guy. All have been doing their jobs for quite a while. I let them do a lot of their own stuff. I mean, you tell me what you need. I'll tell you if we've got the money for it. If not, we'll figure out some way to either get something that'll help or we'll get it. We'll figure out a way to, keep taxes the same as we can. Don't, change a lot. I mean, we can go back to, we can go back to sidewalks. That one time I watched you on YouTube come up and you were sitting at that desk there and you ran up to the camera and went, sidewalks.
Sidewalks, yeah. That's quite a hot button word.
And
for a while.
That was for about 2 weeks. And, and then we got it, I went and talked to some of the people, and were they happy with the decision? Maybe, probably not. But I said, this is what we're doing. I mean, if you look right down the street, that's where the sidewalks comes from, up from the old part of town. Well, yeah, but, there's less trees we got to take out if we go there. Were they happy? Probably not. But you know what? Now you don't hear a thing. And after that, for the rest of the summer, we really didn't have a big problem with it. But it's just how you handle people. Some of that you just got to go talk to them and handle them. Not handle them, but listen to them, tell them your point, let them tell your point.
You still have a lot of gas in the tank, it seems like. What's still on the list? You got some things you want to check off before you check out?
Or
just in general.
Oh.
Like, do you got a bucket list thing? Do you got something where you're like, you know what? It'd be neat to do this someday.
Oh, I've traveled a little bit. I mean, I've been to Europe and back. We'd go to Cancun, in the winter. We've had some trips there. Traveling would be something, probably. Terry, my wife, would like to go to Canary Islands and see her student, her foreign exchange student that lived with her back in the 90s, somewhere, 97.
That's right.
She was from the Canary Islands, and her daughter was just in Waverly as a foreign exchange student this last year, Waverly, Iowa.
I forgot about that.
Patricia's daughter was in Waverly, and she came down and visited Terry and us for a day.
That had to have been kind of a fun little reunion.
It was, and so that really fired up. Terry wants to go to the Canary Islands. I want to go to the Canary Islands. I want to go to the Canary Islands.
Sounds like you better get your butt to the Canary Islands.
It's probably going to happen sometime. She just got her knee done, so it's not going to happen for a while. But she got her medicine changed yesterday, and she's a lot better yesterday and today. Her stomach was getting tore up by the oxy and stuff that they put her on, and so.
Well, I'll tell you what, Doc. And by the way, I started in my head calling you Keith before today, and that just felt really weird. I think everybody. I mean, to you, it probably doesn't matter, but
there's been a lot of people. There's a lot of people in town that never knew my first name.
Yeah. Your first name could be Doc.
You know.
I mean, everybody knows you as Doc. And not Doc Stanley. When you just go around town and you say Doc, it's kind of like, I think I was telling Jane Krameyer this. Like, when you say Jane, you just think of Jane Krameyer in Wilton. When you say Doc, you just think of Doc Stanley.
Well, I've had a good run. I think we got a few more miles left in me, so we'll see.
I think so, too. Hey, listen, I think I speak for a lot of people in town when I say thank you. There's been a lot that I learned just in this short amount of time. Well, it's an hour and 15 minutes.
Holy mackerel.
But this has been fun, and thank you for opening up and telling us kind of the story of Doc Stanley and your Wilton journey, and there's more road ahead.
There's a lot of the stories I couldn't tell on public, information music. I don't know if the statutes of limitations is done with a lot of that stuff.
We'll save that for the after hours episodes.
You can ask Mannix and some of the other guys about some of the softball stuff. We were lucky there was not cell phones.
Oh man, yeah. Maybe a few pictures that are buried in a shoebox somewhere, but that's it.
Yeah, and those could be bad too.
Ladies and gentlemen of the 52778, Doc Stanley. Hey, thank you. Come back and see us.
All right.
All righty.
Thank you very much.
See you later.